If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
5 of them things. EJ Stewart, Tommy Beer, Knicks on a 5-game winning streak. This is Orange and Blue Bloods, the New York Knicks podcast, and Audacy and WFAN original. Tommy, all good things happening for the Knicks this past weekend. 2 big wins, now on the 5th seed, 5 straight wins. What more can I say? To quote the great Jay-Z song.
Something special, something funky, something cool might be going on with these Knicks. They've gone from, a team that, could challenge for a play-in spot to a team that has a chance to maybe get the 6th seed. And now we're, 5 seed is the 4 seed completely out of reach. Probably not. It's a good time to be a fan of the Knickerbockers. It's been a long time since we've been this late into a season and play games that matter. And Knicks versus Celtics tonight. Chance for the Knicks to claim the 5th seed all by themselves. Plenty to talk about. Yeah,
you live for these kind of big matchups later into the season, rivalry game against the Celtics. This is really all Knicks fans ask for. I mean, of course, you won a championship, but obviously there's steps to that, and getting these kind of games with the number 1 seed coming into your house, a game that you got to get to move up in the standing. This is what major basketball is all about. Playoff implicated basketball is all about. And Knicks have earned that right. So fans are excited. The team looks like they're playing at a high level. So should be a lot of fun. This podcast should be fun. Again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, WFAN Audacy original. You can get these episodes wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service that you can get these episodes every time we drop. This is the first of 3 we'll be dropping this week. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Our full episodes are also released on YouTube at our Audacy Sports channel. So search Audacy Sports and find Orange and Blue Bloods episodes there. You can also get segments of the episode on the YouTube channel. So plenty to talk about on this episode, a lot to get to. So let's begin with where the Knicks stand right now. So they come into this week tied for the 5th seed with the Brooklyn Nets. The Knicks erased a big lead on Friday to secure a comeback win over the Wizards in Washington, then returned home on Saturday and just obliterated the New Orleans Pelicans in one of the more dominant performances we've seen from the Knicks all season. Knicks standout performances from Julius Randle. He had 46 points in the win on Friday, another big game on Saturday. RJ Barrett had a pretty nice breakout game on Saturday against the Pelicans. He had 25 points in that blowout win. So 2 big wins. Knicks moved to 5th in the standings, tied with the Brooklyn Nets. They're now 2.5 games up on the Miami Heat, who sit in that 7th spot, that dreaded first play-in spot the Knicks are trying to avoid. The Heat have lost 4 straight. And now Cleveland, only 2 games back from the 4th spot. So a lot of good happening for the Knicks in terms of where the standings sit right now. Just talking about these wins, how impressive were these wins to you? Both very different, but very important for the Knicks.
Yeah, incredibly impressive. I think, as you mentioned, the Wizards game was a little bit more of a show that we can come back from a big deficit, show some heart, show some fight. And then Saturday's game was just a start to finish, put a foot on a throat and dominate an opponent. I mean, they completely outclassed the Pelicans, and after the game, it's similar to the way that similar to the comments the Hawks made right before the All-Star break, and it eventually led to the firing of the coach. Was they outmuscled us? We weren't ready for the physicality. Just basically things that just bow down to a team and say, the Pelicans had a team meeting after the game, like. When you force multiple team meetings after you beat teams, that's when you're playing at a high level. The one, basically the unifying thread through those 2 games was the dominant play of Julius Randle, who continues to play at an incredibly high level. Over his last 6 games, Randle's averaging 29.7 points, 4 made 3-pointers, just 1.8 turnovers, while shooting over 50% from the floor, 40% from the arc, over 90% from the free throw line. Not just putting the ball in the basket, but doing so efficiently. Finding open shooters, spraying the ball out to open shooters. Just incredibly efficient and effective on the offensive end. And probably more importantly has been his defensive effort, intensity, and just effectiveness on the defensive end of late. Put the clamps on Brandon Ingram, the Pelicans' leading
Absolutely.
scorer.
Yeah.
Just really, held him to 7 of 19 shooting. And just the verve and the energy and the effort and the intensity that he has brought to the defensive end of the floor has been remarkable. And if he can use that combination of size and skill to overpower opponents on the offensive end and then dominate them defensively as well, that just raises the Knicks ceiling just a little bit high. We've talked about X factors. Would Mitch Rob stay healthy? Can RJ Barrett get back on track? But if Julius Randle takes his game to another level defensively, that unlocks a different element of this Knicks team. And the one other thing I'll add from Saturday's game, which was really important, I thought, was, as you mentioned, a breakout game from RJ Barrett. The points were nice, but the 7 assists I thought were really good.
Yeah.
Once he gets because we know he can get his foot into the paint. That's the one skill that's translated, basically since he came into the NBA. Can go left, can go right. Obviously better going to his strong hand, to his left hand. But a lot of times he'd force shots, look to get fouled. And that led to not only a low field goal percentage, but frustrated teammates who were standing in the corner wide open, waving their arms. It seems like RJ's doing a little bit better job focusing on seeing the full floor. And that's benefited the Knicks as well. So sum it all up, and the Knicks are rolling right now. And the fact that we talked about these two games, and we haven't even mentioned Jalen Brunson's name yet, goes to show you that that this team is playing well, and that they're a good team, they're a deep team, they're a scary team, and they're a team to be taken seriously at the moment.
Absolutely. And you mentioned how we talked about X factors, and we don't talk about Julius Randle, in part because he's almost like the constant. He's the control. Like, pretty much night in and night out where you're going to get from him. And again, that for me to even say those words is kind of crazy to me, given where he was last season. To me to say that I know I'm getting Julius Randle every night. That was not the case last season. But this season, you kind of know. He's going to he's going to answer the bell. He's going to come out strong in the first quarter. And he's going to have a pretty good game most nights. I mean, even the nights where he doesn't shoot that great, he finds a way to kind of get his volume numbers. Like, he's had another phenomenal season. And what I see from this Knicks team is a team that really is becoming a team. Because when you mentioned the fact that we haven't mentioned Jalen Brunson, and he kind of had two of his worst games he's had in a while in a row in these two games. I don't know if maybe the layoff and the All-Star break kind of got him out of his rhythm. That's what it looks like to me a little bit. But the fact that he had those games and the Knicks were still able to find other players to step up when they needed to. So in Washington, it was Julius Randle saying, all right, I will just double my output basically, and just carry the team to this win. I mean, that first half, he was the only reason they were in the game. I mean, the Knicks looked like they were going to get blown out, and he just dominated the first half. As soon as Kyle Kuzma gave him the little sign, he was like, all right, time to get going. And he just was awesome. And then in this last game, Brunson again, sputtering a little bit. RJ Barrett can pick you up. And that's what I look at this team, and I tweeted over the weekend, like, this is a dangerous team for those top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. This team has multiple bucket getters. This team is physical. Now this team is starting to defend at a high level. You mentioned how they just put the clamps on Brandon Ingram, and it was multiple guys. I mean, there were some plays where Quentin Grimes he wouldn't let him breathe. Like, I mean, and Brandon Ingram has a big bag in terms of moves, and he's giving him everything. Grimes is all over him. Randall's all over him. RJ Barrett's defense improved in the last 2 games. And when they're playing like that, and you got Mitchell Robinson behind you, it's going to be tough sledding for a lot of teams. So the second half defensive performance against the Wizards was a masterclass. Porzingis had a huge first half and then was just invisible the rest of the game. This game, the way they locked up Brandon Ingram, didn't get McCollum going. The Knicks are playing phenomenal basketball, but Julius Randle being that stabilizing piece right now, you just can't say enough about him. When you start to talk about, we know he's an all-star. He already was named an all-star this season. We always talk about comparing this season to the 2021 season where he was all-NBA second team. In terms, the terms and the parameters are a little different regarding how other guys are playing. But, I mean, we're looking at another all-NBA season from Julius Randle. At this point, it feels like he has to be on that list.
I think so. I mean, you can make a really strong case. I thought one stat that I stumbled upon over the weekend really highlighted and the turnaround that Randle and the Knicks have had from last season's disappointment to this season exceeding expectations. Randle played 2,544 minutes last season. The Knicks were outscored by 164 points in that time. This season, he's played 2,221 minutes. The Knicks have outscored their opponents plus 146. That's basically a 300-point turnaround from one year to the other. A lot of it, obviously, Jalen Brunson gets a is a major factor in having a solid point guard. The other thing to keep in mind, Randall's playing a lot more minutes with Emmanuel Quickly than he did last year. Those two were rarely on the floor together, which is something Knicks fans had called for. We're seeing a lot more of that this season. But the other thing is just Randle, his incredible, we talked about him coming in prepared physically. And I thought the really interesting thing is he's mentioned time and time again, the mental aspect, that his mental approach to the game, how important that's been. And that's something that, guys that talk about sports for a living, maybe don't understand or don't appreciate, or it's hard to express. It's hard to quantify, and, shooting percentage and field goal percentage, all that other stuff is easier to say and point out. But then you have a guy, that he's talking about it, and it's clearly made a major impact on the way he's approached the game, the way he's handled games. We see him do kind of that mini meditation prior to games, that deep breathing. So yeah, major credit to Randle for bouncing back in a way that most of us didn't assume he could. He deserves a ton of credit for really, taking his game to another unexpected level. So kudos to Randle.
And this was also the return of Mitchell Robinson in these two games. What did you see from him in his performances in these Knicks wins?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that I think it was plus 39. He's in these last two games, some along those lines. He's just the team is at its best when Mitch Rob is on the floor. As Sims was a decent fill-in, had some good moments, had some bad moments. Hartenstein's played very well with the bench unit, but the team, when a team is firing on all cylinders, it has Mitch Rob being able to finish at the rim, control the offensive boards, and protect the paint, most importantly. And that's exactly what we've seen these last two nights. Really just kind of the things that you would expect from Mitch Rob. Maybe you thought he might show some rust. He hasn't shown any. 6 of 11, 10 of 11 from the field. You expect him to make most of his shots. So definitely, and as you mentioned, this team is legit. This team is scary. They're the only, they're eighth in terms of record, the eighth best record in the NBA, the 7th best net rating in the NBA. Like, this is a full body of work, and especially dating back to that 9-man rotation, that Cleveland game, December 4th, first week of December. Only 2 teams in the league have a better net rating than the Knicks. Only 4 teams have more wins. So that's a large body of work. And as you mentioned, if I'm one of those top teams, I do not want to see the Knicks in April.
Yeah, and you mentioned their net rating, offensive rating, they're 7th, defensive rating, they're 14th, and they've been climbing. Like, this is not like a fluke. Like, the Knicks have been playing, especially in the offensive side of the ball, pretty well above average offensive basketball for most of the season. And that's what you kind of saw in these last few games. I mean, they can get whatever they want in that second half against Washington. Randle obviously carried them in the first. And against New Orleans, I mean, they just got whatever they wanted offensively. Like, they were getting good shot after good shot. And they seem to just be very comfortable with the offense. They just seem to kind of know where the shots are going to come from. It's rare to me, at least these last few games, where it felt like you saw somebody just force up a terrible one. It was actually, anytime it happened, it stood out so much. Like, Randall took like one really bad one in the Pelicans. I remember I'm going, what the hell was that shot? But like, I hadn't said it all game because like they were just kind of, it was like a perpetual motion, as Clyde Frazier would say. I mean, they're really in tune with how they want to play. They have an identity, which I think is maybe one of the most important things an NBA team has to have. If you want to have success, you got to have something you can hang your hat on, something you're trying to do offensively. And the Knicks seem to know what they want to do offensively. They know they're going through their 2 top guns and Randle and Brunson. They know RJ's that third scorer. He's going to try to get into the paint. They know they got a bunch of shooters they're going to try to get the ball to quickly. Grimes, those guys have their roles. And now that everybody's comfortable in their roles and they know what they're trying to do night in and night out, they have a very good chance to win because they got talent. And when I watch the Knicks play, sometimes you just watch a team and you can just see, oh, this is a good team. You know, when you're watching your team, sometimes it's hard to like kind of take yourself out of just like obsessing over every little thing that's happening and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. Sometimes like I like to just kind of take a step back and just watch, especially that Pelicans game, watching these two teams. The Pelicans didn't have Zion Williamson, but a team with talent, a team with guys that, you know, some Knicks fans will clamor for. Like we had someone in our mailbag asking about Brandon Ingram. So they don't got bums over there. I mean, people wanted a CJ McCollum last season. So I'm watching these guys get just cooked by Randle, by Brunson, by RJ. And I'm like, Knicks have a good team. Like this is a good team. The Pelicans are having major problems guarding them. So when you get down to the stretch as the season winds down, a lot to be excited about. But shout out to the whole team and shout out to Mitch Robinson coming back double in his first 2 games. Again, no rust, came in, made an immediate impact on the glass. I thought his teammates also did a good job looking for him as well. Yeah. It's almost like they kind of knew we need to get him going early. Don't make him kind of get feeling like he's not part of the offense. So good job all around by the Knicks in these 2 wins.
Yeah, especially on Saturday night, and you know, it was obviously they were honoring the '73 champs, the 50th anniversary, and I just thought the best way to pay homage to that team was to play like that team, and that's kind of what we saw. You know, unselfish, giving up a good shot to get a great shot. You know, just defensively, it was just that's kind of what you want to see, and that's what we saw.
Yeah, we will talk about that ceremony because it was really awesome. But it was funny. I was a little surprised how much it seemed like the Knicks, and maybe I'm naive. They seem to really care about putting on that kind of performance in front of those guys in that game, knowing how special that night was. And because 1973 was 50 years ago, and we're so removed from that, and so many of these players aren't from New York, except for I guess Obi Toppin, and a lot of these guys don't have that connection to the Knicks franchise. I kind of didn't know how important this night would be for them, and it clearly was. So credit to the guys for showing up the way they did, and I agree. I think they definitely did want to embody the spirit of that 73 team, and we will talk about that celebration in a little bit. But first, let's talk about this game we got Monday night. So Knicks looking to keep their winning ways going. The Celtics come into town. Boston held off the Sixers in a regular season classic on Saturday. You had Tatum with the pull-up 3, Embiid hoisting it from 75 feet out and thinking that he tied the game, sent it to overtime, and it turns out he came up just a tenth of a second short of beating the clock. Just a fantastic game over the weekend. The Celtics had the league's best record. They've won 3 straight. The last time these two teams played, it was one of the best games of the season. Again, one of those games you may consider the best win of the Knicks season. Knicks held on to beat the Celtics 120-117. It was an overtime game. One key element in that game that won't be playing in this game is Jaylen Brown. He is out due to personal reasons, so that is a big loss for the Celtics. So keeping it right there, how does Jalen Brunson's absence impact the Knicks in this matchup?
I mean, normally you'd say a team is missing an all-star, and kind of the second part of the dynamic duo of Tatum and Brown, it would really hamper the team, and it'd be a major blow to their chances to win. The Celtics are the rare team that has the depth to deal with an all-star playing. Will they miss him? Of course, obviously, he's one of the top wing players in the NBA. But the combination of Smart and Derek White and Brogdon, who's done a tremendous job off the bench as a team 6-man, and obviously have Tatum. They will miss Brown, of course, but they have the pieces. They have certainly they're one of the very few teams in the NBA with the depth to kind of make up for it. So that's one thing that to keep in mind is that obviously they will miss their all-star in Jaylen Brown, but they have plenty of guys that can fill in and fill in well. Not just guys that'll come in and hopefully keep them close for a couple of minutes. These are guys that can impact the game in a significantly positive way.
Yeah, the Celtics are an incredibly deep team, and they have the league's best record, not by accident. I mean, this is truly a team that you're looking at and saying this is one of the top 3 or 4 teams that potentially win a championship this season. So it's going to be a tall order. I don't know what's happening with Jaylen Brown. Obviously, I hope he's okay. I know after the game on Saturday, he mentioned that the Sixers fans were saying crazy stuff to him. He said that they were telling him to tear his ACL. And I don't know if that has anything to do with why he's not playing tonight. I would doubt that, but I was surprised at how much he went into detail with how the Sixers fans got under his skin in the previous game. But yeah, one element of that last game who wasn't playing, I think I'm actually curious to see when we talk about like big matchups, is Marcus Smart. Like he didn't play in that game in Boston. And Marcus Smart is the heart and soul of the Boston Celtics. He's the reigning defensive player of the year. And one of the things we saw in that last game was Brunson was absolutely boogieing on the guys they had. And Brogdon is not some slouch defensively, and Derek White is not some slouch defensively. Those guys could not handle Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson has kind of risen to a level of elite to borderline elite point guard that those guys just, they're not going to bother him. So now he goes up against a super elite defender, maybe the best defender at his position in Marcus Smart. That's going to be a really fun matchup to watch. And Brunson sputtering a little bit in these last 2 games. Like, this is also going to be a tough test for him. Like, you know, if you're struggling, the last thing you want to see is Marcus Smart come to your town for most players. But this is Jalen Brunson. This is a guy who has been playing at a high level for most of the season. So I'm excited to see how that matchup goes.
Yeah, definitely the same. You know, you're pitting, you know, one of the best offensive point guards in the NBA in terms of effectiveness and efficiency this season against, you know, as you mentioned, the reigning defensive player of the year. And that wasn't a fluke. Like, he's that good defensively. Another matchup I think I'm interested in is the Mitch Rob Williams, 2 similar players in how kind of they approach the game. And, you know, they're obviously not a lot of plays run for them. They, you know, they get their points off dunks on good passes or offensive rebounds. So that'll be something interesting to watch. Williams had been coming off the bench for a little while as he kind of works his way back from a knee injury, but you know, he's back in the lineup, played 36 minutes. You know, recently. So yeah, I think, you know, that's something that'll be interesting. And also the kind of the bench units. You know, with Derek White now, we assume he'll slide into the starting lineup in place of Jaylen Brown. How does that impact the bench unit for the Celtics? Because that's one of their strengths. We talked about their incredible depth. And the Knicks have, you know, their second unit has been phenomenal of late. So we'll kind of see how those 2 teams battle it out in that respect, because that could very well be you know, one of the keys to the game.
Yeah, you mentioned how good the bench unit has been. I don't want to forget about Josh Hart's heroics in the first game over this weekend. I mean, some of those loose balls he was getting in that Washington game were just crucial, and they're why he's on the team. And like, not that I'm like, I hope Jaylen Brown's okay, but it's not that I want to say, oh, I would want Jaylen Brown to be playing against the Knicks because he's such a great player. But like, one of the things I've talked about with these matchups is, you know, not being able to hide RJ in a game like this typically because they have 2 top-notch wings. The last time these 2 teams played, RJ did a pretty good job defensively, and you didn't really need to hide him. But I kind of would have liked to see, like, how does Josh Hart impact this matchup? Because now the Knicks are in a position where, of course, they're moving towards trying to make sure they're out of the play-in. I don't want to act like I'm moving on from that. But like, you do wonder, what do these matchups look like against these top teams? Because you could be playing them in the playoffs, maybe in the second round, maybe in the first round. So, like, I would like to have seen, hey, like, how does Josh Hart impact a matchup with the Celtics now that they have 2 top-notch defensive wings in Grimes and Hart as opposed to just 1? Like, I think that would have been fun to see. But one thing about the Celtics and the Knicks in terms of how they match up is what helped them, and I think it helped them a lot in that game in Boston, was you can play Brunson and IQ a lot together when the Celtics go small with their guards, because they play Brogdon and Smart together. They play White and Brogdon together. Pritchard hasn't been playing much, but when one of those guys are out, Pritchard plays with those guys. They oftentimes, if Jaylen Brown is not in the game, they'll play 2 small guards. So that allows the Knicks to put their 2 best guards on the court. So that will probably be the case tonight. So I expect to see plenty of that. So should be a good one.
The other thing is potentially the fourth quarter. You know, Barrett did not play down the stretch in Friday's win against Washington, which, you know, raised some eyebrows. I think it's something that we kind of expected, or, you know, at least anticipated, weren't shocked by it, but certainly noteworthy considering RJ's stature within the organization. He played obviously much better Saturday, but it was also blowout. That was another thing. You know, something else important to keep in mind is that both Brunson and Randle played fewer than 34 minutes Saturday. That's the benefit of these blowouts, and that's the benefit of the Knicks having some added depth, as we haven't seen that. You know, those consecutive 40 minutes, 41 minutes, 42-minute games from those guys. And that's especially important considering this is the third game in 4 nights for the Knicks. So in order to get a little bit of additional rest. Yeah, and just the fact that the Knicks, I think the spread last time I checked was like 2 points, 2.5 points. The fact that the Knicks, this late in the season are basically within 2 or 3 points in Vegas's eyes of the best team in the NBA, team with the best record, kind of shows you. Obviously, they're playing without Jaylen Brown, but that goes to show you just how significant. It's not just Knick fans that are overly optimistic about this team. Like you look around the league and the Knicks are slowly but surely flying under the radar a little bit, but they're gaining some national respect as well. They should. And this is the type of game that you can kind of send a statement and saying that we're here, we're for real. We've seen them play really well on the road. They haven't been quite as effective defending their home court. We'll see if they can do that tonight.
Yeah, and you mentioned the minutes, and you're right. They've been able to spread them out a lot evenly. One thing I will mention, Tibbs has got to be smarter about how he's playing these guys in blocks, because there was a play in that Pelicans game where Randle seemed to bang knees with somebody, and he didn't look that hot, and he eventually fouled. I think he was fouled just to come out the game. But, there's questions like, is he okay? Is something wrong? I think he was fine because he was goading the crowd to get Derrick Rose in the game, which was a great moment, by the way.
That was.
It had to be a little awkward for Rose because this guy is an MVP. Now he's the guy they're chanting for to get in the game. But it's always great when the Garden crowd shows the love to D Rose for everything he does for the team, even though he's not playing. But you gotta be smart. That game was well out of reach. Yes. He didn't have to be in there with 5 minutes left. Pull him out. It's a much longer season at play. I know the Knicks have blown a lot of leads, so there's going to be trepidation with taking guys out. But you gotta be smart. And I'm hoping that Tibbs saw that, and maybe we'll think, okay, I gotta be better. You got a good team. If you had a bad team, I'd say, okay, you need to make sure those guys are playing. Or you had a bad bench, I'd say you gotta make sure those guys. It maybe would be more understandable. But considering how well this team is playing, how good they are, there's no need for Randle to be up in a game where you're up 20 points with 5 minutes left. If there's some disaster where you got to bring him back in there, then you bring him back in there. But you can't afford any injuries. You can't afford anything stupid. So Tibbs got to be smarter. He cannot have those kind of lapses on the bench when it comes to who's out there finishing games when it's 25-point lead with 5 minutes left.
Yep.
So talking a big game, by the way, again, Knicks, Celtics, 7:30, Madison Square Garden, be there or be square. It is going to be a barn burner. But I do want to go back to Saturday night because it was a special night at Madison Square Garden. The franchise celebrated the 50th anniversary of its NBA championship. Members of the 1973 team, including Walt Clyde Frazier, Jerry Lucas, Bill Bradley, Earl Monroe, Dick Barnett, were all in attendance for the festivities, while the captain, Willis Reed, delivered a video message on the MSG Jumbotron. The 1973 Knicks finished with 57 wins in that regular season. They beat the Lakers in 5 games to win their second NBA championship. Willis Reed was named Finals MVP. The Knicks had at least 5 players in that series averaged 15 points against the Lakers, and 6 players would be inducted into the Hall of Fame as players on that roster. Phil Jackson, who was a player on that team, was later inducted as a coach. Red Holtzman, of course, who was coach of that team, inducted as a coach. And Dick McGuire, who was a scouting assistant on that team, also a former player who was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So just a world-class collection of talent on that 1973 team. What did you think of the ceremony that happened on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was great the way they handled it. And, these guys are getting up there in years. We see, a couple players have already passed away. They're represented by their children and, wheelchairs and canes. And, that happens when guys get up around that age. So, it's important to give those folks their flowers, while they can still smell them, certainly. So I thought that was a really cool moment. I thought the Garden appreciated it. As you mentioned, I thought it was cool the way the players, the current players handled it too. Pre-game, Tibbs talked about being a teenager in Connecticut, rooting for those teams and being a Knicks fan. And after the game, Barrett and Quickly, and Randall talked about how, just having those guys courtside, having those guys in the arena, they kind of wanted to show out and make those guys proud. And I certainly think the way they played, and obviously not just getting the win, but, as you mentioned, the 5 players averaging over 15 points, and, because that was the consummate team mentality. And I think it's kind of a high that Knick fans have been chasing for the last 50 years or so, and even people born in New York well after those years, are try listen to their uncles and their fathers and their grandfathers, tell stories about passing and unselfishness and all that kind of stuff, and it's been kind of an ethos that the '90s Knicks tried to live up to, and any great team that the Knicks currently have or will have in the future will be compared to those great early '70s teams, as well they should be, because that's kind of the benchmark. So, it was. I thought it was well earned, obviously, and I thought they handled it well. So kudos to everybody all around.
Yeah, it was an awesome ceremony. The gold varsity jackets they gave out, sweet look, just like an awesome. It's gotta be dope to like be one of the 12 or 13 people who have those 50th anniversary jackets.
Well, Clyde said he might put on eBay, so I'm going to be checking eBay.
Well, I hope you paid your credit card bill, because I'm sure that's not going to go for a small penny. I actually do have quickly a little bit of sound from Clyde Frazier talking about what it meant to represent New York during that time.
Enjoyed playing so much with these men. It was such a provocative experience. We had a veteran team. We understood the nuances of having New York on our chest. We knew the high expectations, but we relished those expectations because we knew we lived in the greatest city in the world. We played in the world's most famous arena. And we had unequivocally the greatest fans. So you guys gave us so much confidence that we would say, not in our house, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, not in our house, Kareem and Oscar Robinson. We are the New York Knicks.
I mean, this doesn't get better than that. And it was awesome to hear those stories of that team. And in some ways, I feel like the 73 team sometimes gets like forgotten a little bit because that first championship was so important and also so dramatic.
Yes.
The captain gets hurt. You don't know if he's got to play. He comes out there in the tunnel minutes before tip off. He hits the first 2 jump shots. Like it's so dramatic, and it almost sounds like a movie. We kind of forget about 1973. Like, in the Eastern Conference Finals, they beat the #1 seeded Boston Celtics. That was a team that I think after that point, I don't think they ever lost a Game 7 at home in Boston. Like they were a juggernaut, of course, during those years of Bill Russell. Bill Russell had retired at this point, but I mean, winning in the Boston Garden at home or on the road in the Game 7 was a death sentence. It was impossible, and the fact that Knicks team did that was a huge moment in NBA history, and they used that momentum and then go on and kind of dominate the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. And just the depth on that team. I mean, you talk about the backcourt with Monroe and Frazier, and then the fact they were able to add a guy like Jerry Lucas to an already dominant front court with Willis Reed and Dave DeBusschere, and of course Bill Bradley just being the consummate professional, just like consistent player. Like when I talk to older Knicks fans and they talk about those teams, like I get it. Like I don't sit there and say, "Oh, here we go," talking about the 76. Like, no, like if you love basketball, like go on Basketball Reference, maybe my favorite website of all time, and look at just the talent collection that they had. And when you see, sometimes they don't show many full games anymore on NBA TV, things like that. But just do yourself a favor and watch some clips of just how that team moved the ball, how unselfish that team was, how that team defended. It's why we have the defense chant in sports. Like that started with the Garden crowd chanting for the defense of that 1970s teams. Just an awesome time to be a Knicks fan.
100%. You know, you mentioned the 6 players that went on to the Hall of Fame and the coaching staff, and it remarkable. Also makes you appreciate it. You know, one of the things I think of is Patrick Ewing doing what he did during the 90s with, you know, role players, essentially, you know, Starks and Oakley with full stars, let alone Hall of Fame players. I mean, but again, you know, it's as you mentioned, if we had been alive during that time, I'm sure we'd still be talking about it today. So it's certainly they deserve their recognition, and they got it. And you know, we'll see if the Knicks can continue to keep that spirit alive as they make a push towards you know, they certainly aren't close to reaching those heights yet. But as you mentioned, these are small steps, and they can take another step Monday night. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it will be important and fun to see how this team can continue to embody that spirit. I also want to give a quick shout out to the great Red Holtzman, who of course is not with us anymore, but was honored in that ceremony. Like, I think he's one of the more underrated. When we talk about the great coaches in NBA history, he always gets forgotten. I mean, and I know there are now, as we move on through our history, there are several coaches that have multiple championships. But when you consider what he did with that Knicks team almost immediately when he got here, and he made them an instant title contender. They won 2 championships. They went to 3 NBA finals. How they played in the playoffs, like people forget in 72, they went to the NBA finals. They were only a 48-win team. Like, he just was, and how he got them to play together and how he got them to play defense. Like, I just think that he doesn't get the kind of respect that probably he deserves and what he means to not just the Knick organization, but just to the NBA game as a whole. One of the best coaches in NBA history. So major shout out to Red Holtzman.
And you talk about the coaching trees of the great coaches. Phil Jackson, time and time again, you know, mentioned so many of the key tenets of coaching philosophy that he learned, that he later imparted onto his teams. He learned from Red Holtzman as well. So definitely a factor in there as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the players that were, you know, not with us and had their sons. So the son of Dave DeBusschere was there. Shout out to my guy Dean Meminger, a New York One reporter and anchor who I actually worked with for a long time because I worked at New York One for 6-7 years. Dean's a great guy, and of course he was representing his dad, Dean the Dream Meminger, who played on that 73 team. So it was awesome to see those guys represented as well. It was just a fun night.
Dave DeBusschere's grandson is
grandson. Yes,
but his I think his son was there, but his grandson is actually the guard on Chaminade High School basketball team.
Oh, that is right. Yes, I did talk about that in the broadcast.
A little cool thing. I think he's a
senior. Apparently he's a really good player too. I heard.
He's a little bit undersized. He's like a 6'1" shooting guard, but as a Chaminade alum, I've kept an eye on him the last couple of years. So hopefully, he's doing well.
Absolutely. But absolute fun night, a fun weekend, and hopefully we'll continue a fun season with this New York Knicks team. But that is going to do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Tommy, let the people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you guys so much for checking out this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods, a WFAN Audacy original. You can get these episodes wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the download feature so you can get these episodes whenever we drop. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. We're on the Audacy Sports channel where you can get not just the full episodes, but the segments from these episodes on the YouTube channel visually so you can see all the good stuff we're talking about rather than just also hearing our voice. But anyway, that'll do it for now. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.